Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Hey guys, that's a little introduction to Judaism. If you took Sunday school or Vacation Bible School, you might have heard that song. So again, we're talking about Judaism today. And in talking about Judaism, we're going to talk about the religion, we're going to talk about the people, we're going to talk about the beliefs and practices and history. But I'm not trying to convert you. That's not the purpose of this video, is to convert you to Judaism. When we talk about religions, we're talking about, the personal beliefs of the religions. We're talking about religions as an institution, what influence they have on other religions or other civilizations in world history. So just keep that in mind as we're going through religions, is that no one's trying to convert you to anything here. That we're just learning about the religions and the role they play in history. Okay, so again, we're looking at Judaism. And Judaism is kind of unique because it's a religion and a race of people. So there are people that believe in Judaism, believe the tenets of Judaism, follow the tenets of Judaism. And there are people who are Jewish race, ethnicity, but don't practice Judaism. Now, when we learn about Holocaust, we learn about how when Hitler was gathering up Jews, it was more about the race of people of the Jews and not so much about the religion. So that's something to keep in mind as we're studying history, is Judaism is unique in the sense that they're a group of people, a race of people, ethnicity, and a religion. That's going to be very unique in world history. Judaism is going to be the first monotheistic religion. It's going to be the second of our major religions, the first being Hinduism, which we'll talk more about in period 2 because it develops more in period 2 than in period 1. The Hinduism we know today really streams out of the changes that were made in period 2. Judaism is also going to influence Christianity and Islam. The Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, or the law code of the Jews, is found in part in the Quran and the Christian Bible. And the history of the Jews is going to influence both of those other religions. Let's talk about some basics of Judaism. Judaism was started by Abraham when he made an agreement or a covenant with God. Now again, I am streamlining this. I am not going to give you a full, course of Judaism here. We are just going over the basics. So covenant is an agreement. So God agreed to Abraham that he would give him lots and lots of descendants, and Abraham agreed to follow God's teaching. Now, covenant is a relationship, which is something that we don't see in the Mesopotamian religions, where the gods are always angry and it really doesn't matter what the humans are doing. God has many names in the Jewish religion. The most prominent is Yahweh, but he's also known as Jehovah. So there, again, just something to know that there's several different names for God in the Jewish faith. The law code of Judaism is called the Torah, which again is the first 5 books of the Christian Bible. And in it, it dictates how you should pray, the 10 Commandments, what you should eat, which Jews have to follow, or at least, conservative, traditional Jews have to follow a kosher diet, which follows the dietary restrictions set forth by God in the Torah. Most commonly is that you can't have pork. That's a thing in the kosher diet, in the Jewish diet. Not all Jews follow this diet today, but back in the day, back in the Old Testament, they had to follow this diet. It actually makes a lot of sense, and a lot of other Middle Eastern cultures follow similar diets, because if you think about it, pigs, for instance, have really high fat, and if you're out in the desert and you eat high fatty foods, that increases your risk of a heart attack. So it was kind of a practical thing that they had these dietary restrictions. The Jews also have a number of holy days, holidays, special days, whatever you want to call it. One is the Sabbath, or Sabbat, which is practiced every week. That's in the 10 Commandments, where you have to set aside a day of rest for God. So you can't do any work. It's a day of rest to reflect on your relationship with God. And again, that's known as the Sabbath, or Sabbat. It starts at sundown on Friday and ends its sun up on Saturday. And the reason that Christians don't celebrate Sabbath traditionally and have church on Sunday is because Jesus died right before the beginning of the Sabbath. So he died on Good Friday, right before the Sabbath happened. They actually had to stab him in the side to make sure that he was dead, because you can't have executions on the Sabbath. And then remained in the tomb and rose on the third day, which would be Sunday. So that's why Christians have church on Sunday instead of on Friday like the Jews do. The Jewish temple of worship or church is called a synagogue. And if you look up, you probably have a synagogue in your area. And if you've never been to synagogue service, it's really interesting. When I took confirmation class growing up, we went to several different churches and several different faiths, and one of which was a synagogue. And the service was really neat because they had some audience participation. We were reading the story of Esther, and so for the bad guy, we had to boo every time his name was mentioned, and the good guy, we had to shake shakers, maracas when his name was mentioned. So it was really cool kind of audience participation in the story. I'm not sure what other synagogues are like or whatever services are like, but from my experience, it's really interesting, and it's definitely worth going to just to see what it's like and to see what the culture is like. Okay, let's go over a brief history of Judaism. Now, I mean really brief. You know, this is crash course all the way. Very, very shortened, gloss over history of Judaism. So again, Judaism starts with Abraham and his covenant relationship with God. That's in Genesis. And Abraham has a son Isaac, who has a son Jacob, who has 12 sons, one of which is Joseph. If you've heard of Joseph in the Coat of Many Colors. And he is sold by his brothers into slavery to Egypt, where he's able to rise out of slavery, and I'm really simplifying this, rise out of slavery and become a prominent leader, a prominent advisor to the Pharaoh in Egypt. And he's able to save Egypt from famine and his family. And they come in Egypt, and that's how the Jews get into Egypt. They are eventually enslaved, and they will not be free of that slavery until Moses, who was raised in the Pharaoh's household. Again, very simplifying. Please go read the story in the Bible if you want to know more. Moses is able to convince the Pharaoh, with God's help, to lead the people out of Egypt and free them from slavery. Jews make some bad decisions while wandering the wilderness to get to the promised land, like they make some idols when Moses is up in the mountain getting the 10 Commandments because they think God has abandoned them. When they get to the promised land, they're scared because of the people already living there, and they don't think they're going to be able to defeat them. So we wander around the desert for a while until the Jews are able to enter the promised land, set up the nation of Israel. Israel is invaded, conquered several times. Babylonia captivity is one of those. Probably the most important for world history is the Roman occupation of Israel, and that's going to be when Jesus comes about, is during the Roman occupation. After the time of Jesus, and I think there's some protest against the Romans, they basically sacked the temple of Israel, and the Jews disperse. That's known as the Jewish diaspora. And they go into Africa and India and up into Europe, and that's why, for example, during the time of the Holocaust, there were so many Jews in Europe, is due back to that diaspora. So that's a very, very brief, glossed over history of Judaism, of the beliefs, of the history. Yeah, we will kind of go back to the Jews. We will check in with them periodically and see what they're doing. If you take AP Euro, you do the same thing, and you see how the Jews are doing in Europe and how they affect European society. But they are going to be one of our 5 major religions, so that's something, if you like making lists, you can go and start doing. They're going to be one of our 5 major religions that we're going to study and keep studying about in world history. Next video, we're going to go over some terms for period 1 that I didn't get to cover in the River Valley Civilizations video. And I know you don't like doing vocabulary words, I'm sorry, but they are very important. I'm going to try and make it as interesting as I can, but you need to know these terms to fully understand the history that's going on in this time period and the history that we're going to study later on. So again, I'll make it as interesting as I can. I'll see you then.